This is beautiful. I'm going to actually pass this around because it's so very beautiful. It is Fabriano. Let me read. I've got The Adoration of the Magi is a painting by the Italian painter Gentile da Fabriano. Started around, Alex. Maybe you can like double look at it if you know what I mean, and it can go around twice as fast. This work, housed in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, Italy, is considered his finest work and has been described as the culminating work of the international Gothic painting. So it's the very end of sort of medieval painting in the very early Renaissance. What I really want you to look at, though, is the set. Do you know that's not all painted? It's set in a gold altar. This was Florence of Dante's time, or slightly after. Wealthy, opulent, extravagant. This is the place that Dante never got to go home to. Ever. And in today's reading, we read my favorite part of the Divine Comedy. So I always make a big deal out of it. But it's unfortunately heartbreaking because it's about his exile. As a matter of fact, I'm going to mix it up today and go straight to that and do it first. Okay, digression, and then we'll move back in. You have one more imitation to do for me. I did not do one because I'm a slacker. But you will do one. It is the end of the paradise. It's a translation of the Divine Comedy, but it's not in poetry. It's just in prose. It's written like somebody would talk, but it's still kind of flowery because it's the Divine Comedy. This is going to be a challenge. It's not super long, but it's not really got a plot. You know, I'm hoping that the Kipling one, the Jungle Book one, wasn't as bad as it seemed looking at the length because it had a plot. You know, like, and somebody came in, they had a little conversation. This is no plot. So this is like the final exam of imitations right here. This is the tough one. Do the best you can, though. See what you come up with. But that's what it is. It is a prose rendition of Canto 33, part of it, of the Divine Comedy. So, okay, now we're going back in to my previous topic, which was my favorite part. Okay, it's the wrong, page 744. As Dante goes through the spheres, he meets his great-great-grandpa, which is fun. His great-grandpa is in the sphere of Mars. So who is Mars? God of war. Is on Mars. What sort of saints do we find in Mars?
Would it be wrathful or
Not wrathful. We are outside of the shadow.
zealous?
Defenders, warriors for God.
So Aquinas, basically.
Well, he's in the sun. These are Ethan. These are physically like warriors, not in a metaphorical sense. So his great-great-grandpa went on crusade, for example. And it's kind of out of order, but we're going to talk about him first. Isn't that gorgeous, by the way, that art that's coming around? If it looks gold, it's gold. The whole thing that it's set in. And the three paintings on the top are the wise men, leaving home and then going to Jerusalem and consulting Herod and then going into Bethlehem. And then we have the adoration at the bottom. Absolutely stunning. This is the sort of artwork Florence was, that and Dante and everything all at the same time. This amazes me. His great-great-grandpa tells him about his family. And I just want to mention one interesting thing about his family in Canto 15, I think. He says, the first to take your present surname, Alighieri, whose soul has crawled the first round of the mountain a century and more. Do you remember what's on the first round of the mountain inside the gate? If you don't, there's going to be a hint here. But
And we're talking about
purgatory.
That's the people who kept God waiting. So
No, not the outside,
Oh.
but the first actual round after you enter the gate. Listen and see if you can remember. Okay, it says, whose soul has crawled the first round of the mountain a century or more, who became the father of your grandfather, was my son. You would do well by offering up good works to shorten his long striving at the stone. He's striving at the stone on the first round. What are they punished for under the stone? Pride. He's been 100 years on the first round of the mountain, great grandpa has, under the stone. Under the stone. This interests me because apparently maybe it's a little bit of a family problem, the whole pride thing. We're not going to explore this, but it's something for you to think about. I often wonder how much of our disposition comes to us from family, not upbringing, but genetically. Like we're just like ancestors. I am apparently freakishly like my cousin's daughter, and I barely know the girl. But constantly my aunt will say, oh, it's just like Danielle. Danielle's just like you. So I finally met her a couple of years ago. I'm like, oh, I hear you're just like me. She's like, I know, I hear that too. But we don't really know each other. My brother was not raised by our father. My parents are divorced. My brother is a lot like our father, but he never lived with him. I mean, it's interesting. So this family, apparently, they have a lot of pride happening. So he tells him a little about his family, but he also tells him very, very plainly, finally, Dante, you're going to be in exile. He's had little hints, hasn't he? People who are snarky about Italian politics to him will say, oh, those Florentines, you're going to smart from that too. You're going to suffer from that too. But they don't really give him any details, just enough to unsettle him. But great-great-grandpa lays it out. And here's what he says. As Hippolytus left Athens, okay, you got to know something about Hippolytus and Athens now. Theseus was the king of Athens, and he had a wife named Hippolyta. No, Hippolytus is his son. Hippolyta is an Amazon lady. I don't remember the wife's name. The important thing is he also had a son named Hippolytus, and that wasn't his mom. It was his stepmom. And we had a whole Joseph and Potiphar's wife thing going on. Stepmom has a crush on Hippolytus, and Hippolytus says, I don't think so. And then she trumps up charges and makes it look like he attacked her. And Dad Theseus says, get out. And unfortunately, Dad Theseus also has some sort of ocean god that owes him a favor. And he calls in the favor. He's like, oh, ocean god who owes me a favor, kill my son. So Hippolytus is out on the beach riding away on his horse, and like a storm comes in and waves come in and just like crashes on his chariot and kills his horse and kills him horribly. And then Theseus finds out that he was wrong. Like then he finds out his wife was a rotter and his son was innocent. So the reason I tell you this whole story, Hippolytus left Athens. In this version, he's not killed right away. On trumped up charges that were not true. This is what's going to happen to Dante. Forced to roam by his two-faced and merciless stepmother. I'm at the top of page 744. Just so shall you leave Florence, friends, and home. So is it willed. So does it already unfold. So will it soon be done by him who plots it, there where Christ is daily bought and sold. The public cry, as usual, will blame you, of the offended party, but the vengeance truth will demand will yet show what is true. You will put by and leave behind you. This is the arrow, the longbow of your exile. First, let's fly. All right. Now, this is the part that always gets me. You will come to learn how bitter as salt and stone is the bread of others, and how hard the way that goes up and down the stairs that never are your own. You will live for the rest of your life in other people's houses. And you know, if you've ever been on vacation, even for a while, you know, hotel room's really nice. It's not your room. It's not your stuff. It's not your bed that you're used to sleeping on with your pillow. Imagine that forever. The swank hotel room's going to get old really fast because you can't ever go home. And, you know, you sit down to the meal, it's not your food. You're living on the charity of others. You go up the stairs at night to bed, not your stairs. You will come to learn how bitter as salt and stone is the bread of others, and how hard the way that goes up and down stairs that never are your own. And what will press down on your shoulders most will be the foul and foolish company you will fall into on that barren coast. Ingrate and godless, mad in heart and head will they become against you. But soon thereafter it will be they, not you, whose cheeks turn red. They're going to blush for it someday. Now, unfortunately, that part was wishful thinking on Dante's part. He knew about the exile because, you know, when he's writing, it's already happened. Fingers crossed, someday they will blush for it. Someday they'll call me back. No, they're not going to. This is what his great-grandpa tells him. And he answers on page 748, Father, I do indeed see time's attacks hard spurred against me to strike such a blow as shall fall most on him who is most lax. And it is well I arm myself with foresight. Thus, if the dearest place is taken from me, I shall not lose all place by what I write. You know, great-great-grandpa. It is for it, and I make plans for it. Now, I don't know, I didn't mark it, so I'm not going to take the time to find it. But do you guys remember in the Inferno, there was a place where somebody hinted at something bad that was going to happen to Dante, sort of darkly. And he said something like, yeah, well, I guess we'll deal with that if it happens. When he was very flippant about it. And Virgil said to him, well heeded is well heard. If you heed it, it means you're really listening. You need to listen to what this guy's saying. Because you need to think about this. You need to know. He's telling you for a reason. And Dante's just like, meh, whatever. And now he's really changed as a person. He's like, you know what? Thank you very much. I am going to take this under consideration. But he still has a problem. He says, can I make this not happen somehow? He says, yet if, this is halfway down the page, half friend to truth, I mute my rhymes. I am afraid I shall not live for those who will think of these as the ancient times. Who thinks of these as the ancient times? His time? What group of people thinks of this when he's talking right then and Florence as the ancient times? My work won't come alive for the people who come after me. What does it mean, mute my rhymes? What do you think?
Stop writing.
That would be an option. What if I stop writing? If I stop writing, no one's going to know me. But also, is it going to make a difference in my face? Should I stop writing? What else? Obviously, mute means to be completely silent, right? But how else, metaphorically, might you mute your rhymes just a little? Turn down the volume. Maybe we could say, what would that look like, Ethan? Oh, go ahead, let Ethan.
You can make it. You can make your words more concealing to reach a specific crowd. Like what the early church would do is basically mute their messages.
Yeah, not be so open. Kylie, you want to add?
Also, like he could make it so like there's less punishment. Like there's lessened punishment, so it's not rejected by more people. Like if people are prideful, they'll just immediately reject the book because they don't like the punishment.
Okay, yeah.
It's like muting the punishments of it, so it's more open to more people.
Do you mean the punishments that are being dished out in the book?
Yes, like for the hell punishments and like for the purgatory, like we have to do in purgatory, or the recovery that happens in purgatory, for that like that recovery time on punishment is less,
Mhm.
so it's more opening to more people, and so it's not
Mhm.
rejected as
Mhm.
much.
You got to remember something always when you read this. All these weird Italian names that we don't know are famous people back then. Remember, I told you it's like we write a poem today and it's full of, Trump and Biden and I don't know, Prince William and Kate. And then, we've got some Lady Gaga thrown in. And, it's like everybody who you can think of that's famous. And then somebody reads it 700 years from now. Like, who? But it was allegory or satire or whatever. People who just like I'm thinking of people who died in the last like we tell you the eternal fate of Jimmy Buffett and Heath Ledger and we're just telling you where they are in the afterworld. Like what? And then imagine it's your family. Like what? You put my dad in the fifth circle of hell? What? And so so if he mutes it, maybe he can curry a little bit of favor. And he's asking great great grandpa, is this something I should do? Go ahead. What were you going to say, Ethan?
Savage. This is called the divine comedy for a reason. This is savage.
It's
He's savage.
It
That
is.
That is wild. Great grandpa name dropped 100 different what I call Italian mafia
Yeah,
names.
yes,
Basically
yes.
Italian mafia names. That is so savage.
No, yeah. It'd be like John Gotti. John Gotti is the only mafia guy that I'm totally sure he's still alive. Um, uh, so he says, great grandpa. Let's go hither from here on, just known as grandpa, because I'm tired of saying great great. Should I do that? And then he answered me. Oh, wait a minute. The light in which my heaven found treasure shone, smiled brighter in a rapture. Grandpa beams, coruscating like a gold mirror in a ray of sun. Then answered me. A conscience overcast by its own shame or another's may indeed be moved to think your words a bitter blast. Oh, those people have consciences are bothering them. Yeah, they might not like it. Nevertheless, abjure all lies, but match your verses to the vision in fullest truth. And if their hides are scabby, let them scratch. If it bothers them, who cares? They can deal with it. So says Grandpa. And for if your voice is bitter when first tested upon the palate, it shall yet become a living nutriment when it is digested. This might seem really bitter at first. Like, oh, this is rough. And those people down in that river of blood, that's kind of gross. And that guy eating that other guy, that's shocking. And then, but when we travel all the way through it, he's hoping it will become a living nutriment for us. He's not comparing it to scripture. He knows he's not inspired by the Holy Spirit like scripture is inspired. He knows he is inspired as a poet. And he says, this will bring life to you. And I read that and I was thinking of I think it's in Isaiah. Well, Isaiah is really long, so the likelihood is high that it is there. But one of the prophets was given a scroll to eat in a vision. And the scroll was sweet when you tasted it, but bitter when you digested it, right? He says the words will seem nice, but then as this unfolds, it's not going to bring good things. But this is opposite. He said, it might seem bitter when you first eat it, but as you digest it, it's going to be sweet. It's going to be nutriment. Yes, yes. It was the opposite. So I don't know that was in Dante's mind when he wrote that, but it's what popped into my mind. He says, top of page 747, therefore you have been shown here in these spheres, there on that mount, and in the valley of woe, those souls whose names most ring in mortal ears. For the feelings of a listener do not mark examples of things unknown. If I write a poem and I just throw in people you never heard of, like, okay, I'm not going to remember. But if we wrote and we threw in Hitler and I don't know, Reagan and Margaret Thatcher and, and people that conjured up an image for you, Grandpa says people remember things they have a connection with. So you keep outing these people. And of course, in the story, this is where these people really are in the afterlife. But Dante doesn't know that. Do you know what I mean? He's not saying anything, but I'm reading a poem, it's fiction, or writing a poem, it's fiction. I don't know for a fact that this guy's in hell and this guy's in heaven. These are symbolic in a sense, just like Hitler is a real person. But when I say Hitler, this is why I throw Hitler under the bus all the time, because he's the easiest quick name that just sums up all wickedness for us. Do you know what I mean? We just think of all horrors and wickedness, and we see the concentration camps and everything, and that's all I have to say, Hitler. Done. I don't have to explain myself at all. And that's what these are like. And Grandpa says, put them in, reveal everything, because when we have that sort of visceral, like Hitler connection, it sticks with us. And he said, people need to know this. Yeah, Ethan.
Suggest if any of you go over the books and stuff, do you like kind of pace over the notes and stuff? Because I will have like this the description of the names, and it'll be like, oh, this in this place they did this thing, and they have this backstory, so that we can kind of get Dante on that.
Yeah.
The connection's kind of important.
Okay, I know I'm going to forget to tell you guys this next week, so I'm going to tell you now. And it's for next week's reading because it's just really interesting. And it's kind of a digression, but it's the weirdest thing. You're going to finish the Divine Comedy this week. And my brain went here because Ethan said notes. There are many translations of the Divine Comedy. A new one just came out from Roman Roads Media by Joe Carlson. And they have their own notes. And sometimes and a lot of what I talk about is gathered from the notes of numerous translators, and I go through their notes. And I have another whole set by another lady. Anyway, and the lady was Dorothy Sayers, whose translation of the Song of Roland we read. And so anyway, Dante died. And his sons, if I remember correctly, basically were in Italian named Peter, James, and John. Anyway, he died, and they didn't know where the last 13 cantos were. They were pretty sure he finished them, but they didn't know where they were. And his son was not super bookish. J.R. Tolkien was so blessed because his son, Christopher Tolkien, who just passed away a couple of years ago, devoted his life to organizing his dad's notes and publishing, the unfinished tales, all the notes and things and bits that his dad wrote so we could have them. And he didn't mind being in his dad was in the limelight and he was just the secretary, sort of. Dante didn't have a son like that. He's like, oh, I don't know. Somebody would ask, what did your dad mean by this? Well, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. This was his reaction to the Divine Comedy. But they didn't know where the last 13 cantos were. And so he'd been staying somewhere at somebody's house. And they say that his son had a dream. And his dad took him to the place where he was last staying. And he took him to the bedroom where he was staying. And he pointed next to the bed. And there was a little curtain by the bed. And he pulled, can we go to see Dad's old room? They're there. They're there, like water's dripping. Like they saved them just in time. The last 13 cantos of the Divine Comedy. I love this story. But here's where it just gets really interesting. Dorothy Sayers, translator of all these things, was translating the Divine Comedy. And guys, she died and left the last 13 cantos not written. It's the weirdest coincidence ever. I am not kidding. So I have a copy of Paradise. It's in 3 volumes, my Dorothy Sayers. And the Paradise volume, it's by someone else. Part of it. And it says in the introduction, by a strange coincidence, Miss Sayers passed away while she was translating this, leaving the last 13 not translated. So I have stepped in and done the best I could and written the notes and everything. So the notes change. They're not quite the same. I love her notes. And then I get into those and like, oh, it's the other lady. She's fine, but it's not the same. And yeah, this is, it's so, anyway, there's nothing, I mean, it does have something to do with the Divine Comedy. It's the weirdest story. And I thought, I have to remember to tell you guys this story.
She probably doesn't know. She might know. She like before she died, she's like, oh, the 13, last 13.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, she if she didn't know, but like, that's cool to be like Dante, you know?
Yes. No, it's very, very cool. So back to Ethan, I highly recommend. We will finish this next week, but we have only, I hope you guys realize this. And if you realize nothing but this, I've done well. We have scratched the surface barely. I mean, this was probably reading it again with you guys, maybe the 6th or 8th time through. Like I get to parts like, I don't remember that. I don't know that was going to happen. I don't have a great retentive memory when I read, but still, it's just so much stuff. I don't remember it. So, okay, let's talk about things I've put on the board that I'm probably sitting in front of for you. Much of what this section that you read this week talks about are under these two categories. He talks a lot about God's will, and he talks a lot about justice and what justice looks like. So my question for you, my first question is, what in the world do these things have to do with clearing your vision to see God? Do you know what I mean? He's rising through the spheres. And, he keeps squinting and doing this. I'm like, don't worry, Dante, your eyes will get better. And then Dante, Beatrice says, I can't smile. And now I can smile because you can handle it and you won't turn to dust or whatever. He's getting better so he can handle it. But Dante spent a lot of lines and space in a very, he has a lot to say, but he seems to think these are important. And they must be important for him to see them as he rises through the spheres to see God. So I just want to throw this out here for a little while. What do the concept of justice and the concept of God's will have to do with being able to see God better? The floor is open. Rhett.
For God's will, knowing why he does stuff and knowing why he's created stuff, you're finding out more of his plan, and so you're kind of gaining more knowledge, not to become God, but becoming more like God. Not that you're going to be God, but you're becoming more like him, and so he reveals stuff to you. We kind of had this conversation about like sin, like what if God eventually revealed, and so it's kind of like the same thing. God's revealing stuff as you understand more, as you have more knowledge.
Have you noticed that the souls in paradise keep saying things like, we see directly into God's mind? We don't see, like Moses with the veil, it says in the New Testament, but we will see him face to face without the veil. Okay, I'm going to let Alex go first and I'll let you go.
All right. I was just thinking about how understanding God's justice would help us see God better, and my mind immediately went to Jesus. Why did Jesus have to come? Well, it's because we broke the covenant that God made with Adam. So by law and by the agreement of the covenant, you were all meant to die. So the mercy, the mercy that God gave us in order to,
because that's the flip side, isn't it?
It's why it's merciful. Why it's merciful is because we all deserve to die because we all broke the law, which is justice. If we don't understand the law, then we don't know why we need to be saved.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Ethan.
God's will. Ooh, this is good. So, salvation. In the fullness of sanctification is the alignment of our will with God's will. We don't have a will anymore when we are aligned in sanctification and salvation, the fullness of salvation. Once that cutoff is our will is not our will anymore. It's God's will. We do the will of the Father. The Son, it's the same, does the will of the Father. That was that for God's will. Justice, justice is another huge thing. It's crazy. It's the same thing with Beatrice. Beatrice, basically, she was being very loving about it, but like, she was very just the whole time, and she called out Dante, and you're like, no can do Dante. But justice, when we are in the fullness of, when we are being sanctified, we see the world differently. We don't see things based on that poor thing and that poor thing. I just wish they could do that sin or whatever. No. We see the whole world differently. Our eyes are literally open. The veil of our peon brains is quite literally is open, and we see the fullness of justice, and we also see the fullness of mercy. And those two words, justice and mercy, those can't be words without love. The word love, faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. Love, justice is is to not to basically to control us, but to align us with God. But mercy is also because we aren't God. We can't be God. We can't be God. So those go hand in hand with love, and then God's will. We align ourselves with God's will.
On this
Philosophy.
earth, yes, on this earth, let's limit us to right now, what we know. Is God's will always apparent to us? Like no, it's not. And we don't even always mean the same thing when we say God's will. Because like, for example, it says in scripture, he does not will that any should perish, but that all should come to a knowledge of the truth. He doesn't will that any should perish, but yet some will perish. What? God doesn't will that they perish, but they will perish. Do you see? So there are certain things God doesn't will for anyone to go to hell, but some will go to hell. There are certain things that God, in his sovereign will, did he will Adam and Eve to sin? No, but he allowed it. But then sometimes we get very specific about God's will. It's like, is it God's will for me to go to this college or that college? Do you know what I mean? This is a very specific. And I don't know if it's his, I don't know if, I was going to say, I don't know if he cares. Do you know what I mean? There are certain things, like you pray and you use the knowledge you have and you say, God, guide my steps, and then you make a decision. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes that's how we operate. But then sometimes you look back on decisions. Did I make the right? I don't know. But so God sometimes reveals things he wants for everyone. But since he allowed us free will, it's not going to work out that none should perish and all should come to a knowledge of the truth. Not going to happen. So we mean a lot of things. It's mysterious to us. Is this God's will? We say it, and I don't mean to be flippant about this, but if someone is ill or passes away, well, it was God's will. It was their time, but that doesn't help me. People don't mean anything bad when they say that. They mean something nice. And I agree that God's in charge of everything. But yet it was like, well, can you explain that to me? Why would he will that? Well, I don't know. This is not an answer we have.
God needed him to die now.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's not very it's like you said, it's true, but it's not like, you're almost kind of being mean a little bit.
And it doesn't give me information, does it?
Right. Yeah. God wanted him to die now, so it's time. It sounded like you doesn't sound like you're giving them sympathy.
Yes.
Well, it was their time.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's
better. No, it's not better for me. So God's will is sort of a mysterious thing to us. We know certain things. He wills that we obey him. He wills that we believe in his son. Certain things we know. And a lot of things we don't know. Justice is the same way in earthly realm. And the psalmists, don't they always cry? Not always, but many of the psalms cry out, oh God, when I look at the wicked and they're a bunch of jerks, but they're filthy rich and I don't understand and they never get sick, but I always get sick and everybody hates me. I do the right thing and they do the wrong. This is not an actual psalm. Making up my own psalm now. But I mean, they really sound like, I mean, this is a pretty good representation of some of the psalms. And then in one particular one, whose number I don't remember, he says, and then I went into the house of the Lord and I contemplated their ends, the wicked man and the just man. Then I looked behind and I saw the rich man and Lazarus, on the other side, where Lazarus is very pleasant and the rich man's not so pleasant anymore. And so I realized that God is not unjust. I don't know the whole story yet. But so I'm comfortable with that. It's like, okay, in this world, God's will, mysterious. Justice, I don't know. Doesn't look just to me. But the weird thing about the Divine Comedy is it seems to be the same for the people in heaven. It's like Red said, very well, we're never going to be God. We are going to be enlightened. Some of the early church fathers would say, we're going to be like God, but we get to be what he is by grace. It's all a gift. But I will never be omnipotent. I will never be omniscient. But I will be like God in whatever creaturely way I'm given, but not, it'll all be a gift to me. Jesus gets to be God because that's his nature. I get to be like God because it's a gift to me. But these people don't seem to understand. So let me look at a few examples. Let me show you what I mean. You guys are going to have to be patient because I've just got stuff scribbled all over this page. I'm not very organized at all. Okay. So God's will. Okay, here's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to, I don't want to go all the way back there. Oh, yes, I do. Going back to, page 7. What? Oh, am I looking at the wrong page? No, I'm really sorry, guys. 772 is what I wrote, so I'm going to trust myself. Oh, no, that's not the one I wanted. It was at the beginning. Anybody know what page Canto 13 starts on? If you find it before me. It's a race. It's a race. Oh, I'm there. Never mind. Page 708. Here, I'll stick this book in the other page. He is with Thomas Aquinas and the Doctors of the Church still on the Sun. And you might remember, this is a detail I don't think I asked you about in the questions. Aquinas or Bonaventure, don't remember, said something like Solomon, no one rose higher than Solomon. And Dante's thinking, hello, Christ and Adam. And I'm like, no. You don't understand. Like Adam was a direct creation of God. He was special. God formed him out of the dust. And Jesus is obviously special, but I'm talking about kings. And so he explains himself, okay? The explanation is not important, but this is the part I want to focus on. 708, he says, second stanza, and lead weights to your feet may my words be, that you move slowly like a weary man to the yes and no of what you do not see. For he is a fool and low among his kind, who answers yea or nay without reflection, nor does it matter on which road he runs blind. Be slow, he says, to say, oh, this is the way it is. Oh, that's not the way it is. To say yes or no. Be slow. Opinions too soon formed often deflect man's thinking from the truth into gross error, in which his pride then binds his intellect. Have you ever given an opinion on something and then you found out later you were wrong, but you doubled down on the original opinion because you didn't want to look like a stupid idiot and say I was wrong? I feel like maybe we've all done this. You do not have to share. But I'll just say that I have. Yeah, when we are quick to say, oh, yeah, this is the answer to that. This. Oh, no, it's totally not like that. And then you do some more reflecting and thinking, and like, oh, shoot, I think it is like that. But if I say so, then everybody's going to think I'm an idiot. So I'm just going to no, this is it. I know it was my sibling that took those cookies. I did not take those cookies. I know they're the kind that would take the cookies. They so would take the cookies. And then you see another sibling with crumbs all over them. Yeah, but it was the original one. I know. They're just a jerk all the time and they always take my cookies. Like the other one's covered in crumbs. It was the other one. No, I'm going to double down on the original opinion. And Aquinas says, be careful. And listen, this is the bottom of page 708. Line 130. Men should not be too smug in their own reason. Only a foolish man will walk his field and count his ears too early in the season. In other words, don't count your chickens before they hatch. For I have seen a briar through winter's snows rattle its tough and menacing bare stems, and then in season open its pale rose. I thought that thing was dead. It's blooming, I'll be doggone. And I have seen a ship cross all the main, true to its course and swift, and then go down just as it entered its home port again. Let Tom and Jane not think because they see one man picking pockets and another is offering all his goods to charity, that they can judge their neighbors with God's eyes. For the pious man may fall and the thief may rise. We don't know in this world either of these things. When we see someone who doesn't seem to be a Christian at all, you don't know. Where there's life, there's hope, right? And just because someone seems very pious and devout, you don't know. People sometimes get up and say, I'm done. Sometimes somebody hurts their feelings at church or, what have you. My grandma didn't go to church for 40 years because somebody insulted her. I'm not proud of that story. But, it snapped her. And so we don't know what the future holds. God does. And so I love Aquinas's advice. We just can't judge. So given that, I want to flip back to page 771. It's Canto 20. They are in Jupiter. Who is Jupiter? King of the gods. So who do we find in Jupiter? The kings, the just rulers. And they are going to illustrate both of justice and God's will to us. But I want to look at God's will. Dante freaks out a little bit because there's two guys on Jupiter that we just didn't expect to see. Do you remember this? Do you remember who they were or what their status was? Why would we not expect to see them? Ripheus and Trajan are the two. Why would we not expect to see them in heaven? Ripheus is described as Ripheus the Trojan. And I will just tell you that he's mentioned just a little blip in the Iliad, It's like, and Ripheus, the most righteous of the Trojan people, whatever. That's all. That's all we know. Trajan. Who is Trajan? Oh, is your mom giving you the stink eye? Like, don't you know Trajan? Say it, say it. Like, no, I don't. So, okay. Trajan was a Roman emperor. Some of you last year read letters that Pliny the younger, not the elder, wrote to Trajan and said, I don't know what to do about these Christian people. This is what they do. And Trajan's like, oh, well, don't hunt them down. But if they admit they're Christians, you have to do something about it because you can't have that sort running around in the empire, being cannibals and, and incestuous and everything. We can't have that. That was Trajan. So, and Trajan and Ripheus are in paradise. And, okay, just let me see his reaction. Okay, page 772, line 79. And though my eagerness to know shone clear as color shining through the clearest glass, I could not bear to wait in silence there. But from my tongue burst out, how can this be? forced by the weight of my own inner doubt. At which those lights flashed in new revelry. They all dance. I'm like, oh, we're so happy he asked. We want to tell him. I'm sorry, this is the lights flashing. I realize this might not be as clear to you as it is to me. So he is told that on page 773, third stanza, one rose again from hell, from whose dead slope none may return to love into the flesh. And that was the reward of living hope. And then line 118, the other, by that grace whose blessings rise out of so deep a spring that no one ever has plumbed its sources with created eyes, gave all his love to justice there on earth. And God, by grace on grace, let him foresee a vision of our redemption shining forth. All right, this is going to be controversial. I know it. These pagans, God revealed himself to them. Go ahead. You do your question, Ethan, and then I want to say something about Trajan.
What does he mean by rose again from hell?
Okay, I'm so glad you asked, because this is exactly, this is not the controversy. It gets worse. No. Okay, so this is the famous story about Trajan. Dante didn't invent this. I came up with the Ripheus. That was just all Dante. But Trajan, the story goes, Trajan was one of the 5 good emperors. He, despite the Christianity thing, and by the way, he thought they were incestuous cannibals. Like he didn't ever hear the gospel. Do you know what I mean? He didn't know. They're just a subversive group that's causing trouble in the empire, and we can't have that sort of thing. He did not know who Jesus was or anything, as far as we know. But he was, in other respects, along with his emperors before and after, a really good guy. Ruled justly, ruled well. And the famous Trajan story, and by the way, this is a pagan story about Trajan. This isn't a Christian story I'm about to tell you. The pagan story is that once upon a time, Trajan was going out to a battle somewhere. And this widow lady waylays him and says, justice, justice, I need justice. I'm being oppressed. And he says, well, I'm busy here. And when I get back, I'll deal with this. And she says, what if you don't come back? Well, the next emperor will deal with it. What, are you going to give the glory of doing a good deed to your next in command? You don't want to get the glory yourself? It's like, okay, this lady's really persistent. So the story is that he got down off his horse and went and investigated the lady's affairs before he left for the war. He's like, okay, this lady, I got to help this lady. And he did it. That's a story that pagans tell about Trajan, not Christians. Okay, the Christian story is that Pope Gregory the Great in 550 to 600-ish, okay, really loved Trajan. Like, he read stories about Trajan. It's like, Trajan was such an awesome guy. Like, how could you be that good a ruler and be completely oblivious? There was something in him. And I think that if he had had a chance to hear the gospel, he would have become a Christian. So now, tell the story. I do not give any, of its validity. I'm just telling you the story. That Gregory prayed for Trajan to be returned to life so he could witness to him and share the gospel with him. And that Trajan was given this grace and did become a Christian. And then that sort of like he had, again, I'm just telling you the story. Right? Don't shoot the messenger. I'm not just telling you the story. That he had, just like Ripheus, it says, I've already turned the page, sorry. That it said it revealed to him in a vision. Like, oh, this is going to happen someday, and this is the true God. Okay, I will worship him. And then that's counted for, it was accredited to him as righteousness, as they would say in the book of Hebrews. That's the story. So this is not Dante's invention. Like, the story that Trajan was saved by a special grace, I have nothing to say about that. But It does show an illustration of the I call it the don't be hasty illustration. Don't make hasty judgments because you just don't know. So here's what I wrote down because Canto 19, 762, 763 in there, talk about justice. And they talk particularly about this sort of justice. Well, how is that fair? How's that fair that Ripheus and Trajan get to be in heaven? Virgil doesn't get to be in heaven, you know. And here's what Dante says, page 762, line 58. In the eternal justice, consequently, the understanding granted to mankind is lost as the eye within the sea. It can make out the bottom near the shore, but not on the main deep. And still it is there, though at a depth your eye cannot explore. I can see the coastline. I can see, when you wade around in the shallow water, I see the sand. I can't see the bottom of the ocean, but it's there. God's justice is sometimes sort of visible. Sometimes it's like the bottom of the ocean, but it's there. He's working it out, and you can't make hasty judgments about what he does. It says, who are you? 763, line 79. Who are you to take the judgment seat and pass on things 1,000 miles away who cannot see the ground beneath your feet? Down to line 88. Only what sorts with it, the supreme good, the primal will, is just. What is justice? It is God. And if God wants Trajan to be in heaven, Trajan gets to be in heaven. And that's all there is to it. Now, I'm not saying he is. Please understand where I'm coming from. We only have, this is the problem of the virtuous pagans. What do we do? He says this.
Did you worship like Roman gods?
Who?
Trajan.
Oh, yeah. I'm not going to be able to find it. Oh, here we go. Bottom of 762. For you used to say, a man is born in sight of Indus's waters, and there is none there to speak of Christ, and none to read or write. And all he wills and does, we must concede as far as human reason sees is good. And he does not sin in either word or deed. There's some guy, he's living in India. There's nobody to witness to him. There's no missionaries. And as far as human reason goes, he's good. He doesn't lie, he doesn't cheat, he doesn't steal, he cares for his family, he's a good man. As far as human reason goes. He dies unbaptized and cannot receive the saving faith. What justice is it that damns him? Is it his fault that he does not believe? This is the problem we are faced with. This is the justice problem. Yeah, Alex.
I have an answer to that.
Please.
Well,
I have 3 answers here, but go ahead. I bet one of them is mine.
okay. The eagle ends up saying they are closer to God than many who cry Christ.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, deep. And I wanted to ask about that. How does that solve the problem, whether they're in hell or not? If they're closer to God, well, are they in heaven or not?
I don't know. I don't have an answer to that one. Is it okay? Here's the first story that popped into my head. I'm being hasty, just like he said not to be. I'm grabbing the first story that comes to my head. I'm thinking of the story where the father has 2 sons, and he asks them both to go out and work in the field. And the first one says, "You betcha," and he doesn't go. And the other one says, "Nah, don't think so." And then he changes his mind later. So says, "Yeah, I should go do that." And he says, "Which one did the will of the Father? The one who talked the talk or the one that walked the walk?" And it's the one that walked the walk. He's closer to the will of the Father. Okay, let me go through my options here, Alex, and we'll see if we can shed light on it. Here are some options. I am not selling any particular version of these options. I'm just presenting them. First of all, if you are a good Calvinist, There are no virtuous pagans. No one can ever do anything good without Christ. That would be a Calvinist view. You have nothing good in you. You are completely corrupted. No pagan can ever do a good thing. Well, it has to do with what they think that your will has been completely depraved by sin. That's good lunch. That'll be your lunchtime talk. All right, you can talk about Calvinism. That's your assignment. It's not. It's not. But this would be a Calvinist viewpoint. People without Jesus never actually do anything good. It just seems good. Deep down, it's not a good thing. They can't ever do anything good. Okay. Most people we live around today, not us, but the non-Christian world, would probably say we're all the virtuous pagans. In other words, God's letting everybody in. God would never condemn anyone to hell. God is too nice. Well, they don't think it exists. I mean, there was even a famous, what is that? Okay, I don't want to be controversial here because it's going to be like the favorite author of somebody, but that book called God Wins. Do you remember his name is Bell? Isn't his name Bell? And there was a book, and it was not very long ago, and basically it was selling heresy. It was selling. Thank you for nodding, because now I'm like, oh man, I'm going to get phone calls later. And said basically there is no hell and everybody is saved. This was a mainstream Christian book. I'm just saying.
But God is showing love when you choose to live.
They don't care, Alex.
When you say that you hate God,
They don't
he
care.
says, I love you enough to give you exactly what you want, and that's what hell is.
They don't care. Okay, here's an option that I don't think you're going to like. But it's really not from me, okay? Like there so I'm going to tell you a story from the Chronicles of Narnia again. This is in the last battle, which I don't, if you know the story of the last battle, don't blow it up for somebody who hasn't read it. But I'll just say that they happen to be, some characters happen to be in Aslan's country, which would be heaven, basically. If you know anything about the Chronicles of Narnia, you know who Aslan is. Like nod. Okay, respond in some way. Okay. So these characters happen to be in Aslan's country, and there's a guy sitting there, and his name is Emeth. Interestingly, Emeth means truth in Hebrew. Emeth is sitting there, and he's a Calormene. If you ever read The Horse and His Boy. Now, you know, the Calormenes live to the south. They worship Tash, and they're basically Muslims. I mean, they're basically an Arab Muslim group. That's how they talk and how they dress and everything. And it's very opulent in Calormen. But they worship they worship a pagan god. He's nasty too. And Emeth is sitting there by the side of the road, by the side of the path, and Aslan's walking with these characters. And Emeth, yeah, go ahead.
I would been thinking about this.
Okay, you're thinking about Emeth?
What he said, what Aslan said to the thing they were
Yes.
why he was in.
Yes. Why am I here? And do you remember his answer? What does Aslan say?
He said anybody who worships, basically anybody who worships Tash, truthfully, they worship Aslan.
If you worship in spirit and in truth with your whole heart, he said, you never worshipped Tash. Because that ugly image of Tash, that was never in your heart. That was never in your mind. Everything you offered, I took. You didn't know I was taking it, but I took it. And this sounds very much like the ones who do the will are closer to God than the ones who talk the talk but don't do it. Now, I'm not saying C.S. Lewis caught some heat for this. Like, oh, C.S. Lewis is, universalist. He believes everybody's going to heaven. No, he doesn't. There's some dirty Tash followers who didn't go to Aslan's country. But Emeth, truth, saw something that he didn't fully understand, and he operated according to the light he'd been given by God. God revealed, he grew up in this place. This was what he knew, but he knew something more. God revealed to his heart, but there's something more than this. There's something beyond. And I am not making a theological pronouncement that this is so. Please don't, this is, like a lit class. It's not a theology, but this is a very theological book. But this is an option. And I will sum this option up this way. I don't know what God's arrangement is with other people. I don't know. And it's none of my business. It always makes me think of Peter. Peter's denied Christ 3 times, and then Jesus is alive again, and he walks with Peter. You all know the story. Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? 3 times for all the denials. John, and I like to think John is like eavesdropping. It's like, oh, I want to get in on this. Like, why is he following them? Oh, check out what Jesus is telling to Peter. And Peter said, Lord, what about him? We do this all the time. What about him? What about him? And Jesus' answer cuts me every time. It's like, what business is that of yours? If I want him to remain till I come again, how is this your business? You follow me. You got one job, Peter. You follow me. I'll take care of him, right? Stop worrying about God's arrangements with other people. And then John goes on to say, well, then a rumor spread that disciple was never going to die. That's not what Jesus said. He said if, and he explains himself. And C.S. Lewis does the same thing in the Chronicles of Narnia. In The Horse and His Boy, Shasta and Erebus, they want to know, well, God, what's his story? What's her story? And Aslan says over and over, you don't get to hear anybody's story but yours. If other people want to share their story later with you, that's fine. I don't reveal anybody's story but your own story. I don't go gossiping about other people's stories. I have my own arrangement with them. And okay, I've got 2 hands. I'll let Rhett go first, and then.
Exactly what I was gonna say.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rhett.
So the hard, like, I mean, obviously, I don't think. But believe the Aslan thing, where like you weren't worshiping them, you were worshiping me, to that kind of thing. It's just hard because there's so many other, like with religions, with Muslim, Buddhism, Hinduism. There's so much stuff that you do. It's like you're focused. Like, I don't know. It's like you're focused on that God, and there's really no like, well, you weren't really doing that for them. It's like pagan stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
Like some of like the sacrifices and offerings and that kind of stuff. Like super pagan, super sinful. And if God's saying like, that was for me, like, no, God doesn't.
Yeah.
God doesn't want that. Like,
What are we going to do with Naaman? Naaman, who was healed of leprosy, and because he, dipped in the Jordan 7 times, and then he went back to what? This was Elisha, because Gehazi was the guy who went back for the gifts. That's how I keep him straight. He said, I want to give you these presents. And Elisha's like, no, I don't want your gifts. He says, well, let my Lord forgive one thing. When I go back to Syria and I go to the altar of Rimmon with my Lord, and he leans on my hand and I bow down at the altar of Rimmon, may he forgive me. And Elisha said, go in peace. What does that even mean? I don't know. It's okay with God if he goes in because it's his job. Like he's in a pagan people. He's in a pagan world. He's going there with the king, and the king is leaning on his arm. And it's like he does the little bow. Now, the early Christians died so that they wouldn't do the little bow or the pinch of incense. But yet here it's like, but Elisha says, yeah, go ahead. And Naaman didn't even understand. Naaman took a jar of dirt. It's like some of the Pirates of the Caribbean. It's a jar of dirt. And he brought a jar of dirt from the Holy Land because, they thought that gods were specific to countries. A lot of ancient people. It's like, what's that God of Israel healed my leprosy? So I'm going to take a jar of dirt from Israel, and then I have like part of this God with me. And Elisha's like, take the dirt. This is how much Naaman understood. What is Naaman's ultimate I don't know. I don't know.
But like,
I'm not arguing with
no,
you,
okay,
Rhett.
no, no, no,
Okay.
no. Like, are you saying, yeah, that is, will God forgive? Now, there's no, obviously, there's no right or wrong answer, but will God forgive sins of people like Jesus? When Jesus was on, and he would say, like, your sins are forgiven, this kind of thing. Would he forgive people's sins who would not eventually believe in him? Because I feel like it talked about when they asked, do you want Jesus or Barabbas?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was Barabbas, Barabbas, you want Barabbas, like to be free. I would think that with how many people he healed and all in that spot, that there'd be some people in there that he healed that would be on Barabbas. And that's just my.
It's very
So-
possible. Yeah. Okay. Are you done, Rhett?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to Kyle.
I have a so with this, well, let's say here that he forgave all their sins up to that point. Like unless you keep that faith with God and you keep repenting to Him, then those sins will go without repentance. It takes one sin to fall short of the glory of heaven.
But we know they don't continue with it.
If they don't continue with it, then I think they're sinful.
Yeah. But if they do,
Then they have glory to God, faith in God.
I don't know.
Which makes them saved.
sorry, I haven't got to
They'll
the
be
eagle of
sinful.
justice yet.
They'll
We
be
only have 15
sinful.
minutes. Are you kidding me?
There's
Okay.
no way that they're not going to sin. Like that's.
No,
that's
but
sin
it's like
covered.
us. But we continue to repent, hopefully.
Yeah. And so, if they put this also talks about like because before Jesus came to be a Christian, there was so much you had to do. Even while Jesus was still there,
Mhm.
it wasn't
Sure.
like tomorrow we're gonna change everything.
Right.
It took a while for people to, and so this is like, well, Jesus was here. Do they just believe in him? Like when did God? He hadn't died yet for some of these people.
Mhm.
So like, the resurrection hasn't happened. So are we technically still Old Testament? Like it's just.
I know. Okay, we're going to let Alex chime in. I do want to get to that eagle, but we'll see.
This isn't a question. It's just an example. Remember when Jesus forgave the sins of the person on the red cross? That person didn't even know who it was. He didn't know that this was Jesus who came to forgive all the sins of the world. He lived a life as a thief, and apparently a bad enough thief that in paradise. I don't.
Faith is not represented by, oh, I have faith in this specific name of God. I
Right.
don't have the specific faith of this specific thing. It's more of, I trust you even though I don't fully know everything. That's
And
what
that's what he did. He was on the cross dying, and
Mhm.
God just said his sins were forgiven, which he probably knew what that meant. But he was obviously a thief, and like
Yeah,
a thief was back
Yeah.
then
that, that
Christians,
faith
and so
means
he
that-
just
Lord, remember me when you come into your
I
kingdom.
mean, it's, yeah, it means
That's all he said. That's all he said.
Yeah.
Oh,
but
I'm
it
sorry.
didn't necessarily say that the guy believed it or that the guy understood.
Yeah, just remember me when you come into your kingdom. Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
But that's
Like he doesn't even know what the
that's-
kingdom is.
That's faith, because one, like you said, he doesn't know what the kingdom is, and two, he's letting have it all. Like he's just like giving it all up, and so
Yeah.
I'd say that's faith.
That's
And
faith.
same with all, like at that point he hasn't resurrected, so is he? Therefore, that's when the New Testament is put into place, as soon as he dies, and so that time period of when do you go from the Old Testament to the New Testament is right there on the cross.
Yeah.
Bam.
Yeah.
So like, so
Because-
the other people that
because
he forgave their sins before he died. They have to keep doing sacrifices until the resurrection. As soon as the resurrection had, then they start believing and they stop doing all the sacrifices.
It's rare,
I mean,
I don't know.
That shit.
but it
I think
that's
that
the minimum. I
people
think.
that like I don't know. I just feel like from what I've read and seen and like looked at from all this, like those people, Jesus is here. Jesus told them that he was the Messiah, and if they're believing in him, I would think that they would go to heaven.
Well, I'm going to just throw this out here, and this is my personal, okay, this is the Mrs. Ferguson opinion. I don't know. I don't know. And so this is why, so in some church traditions, we pray for God to have mercy on those who have already passed. We are not, those people who do that are not asking for God to save people who are not saved. Do you know what I mean? But like, what else can we say? God have mercy. Please have mercy. This is all I know how to pray, because I don't know, like, with their last breath and their last moment. Remember the guys who were barely in purgatory? It was like, yeah, I was a big fat rotter, but as I was dying, I called out to God, please forgive me. And here I am. It's like the one who comes to work in the field at the 11th hour gets the same pay, right? This doesn't seem fair to me. You know, I kind of hate that story. I'm very much like the prodigal son's older brother, you know. Well, he's a jerk. I'm always doing the right thing. What make it anything good, you know? And you just, this is, I'm sorry, this is my personal confession. I'm like that a little bit, trying to not be. So it's healthy for me to say, you know what? It's like John and Peter. It's like, I don't know his arrangement with other people. And if he wants to reveal himself to some guy in a tribe in the middle of the jungle who's never heard a missionary, and somehow he has a vision or a dream, and he says, I believe the true God of the universe is speaking to me, and he has an arrangement with God. I know my arrangement. And my arrangement, and all of your arrangements, is this. We live in a country where the gospel has been preached to us. We know who Jesus is. We know what the church is. We know what God wants us to do because we have the Bible. Do you know what I mean? And so I know his deal with me. I can't just nebulously worship some weird thing in a dream because I've been given the truth. But some other person, I don't know. I feel like this is the no hasty judgment sort of thing. What does God's justice look like for other people? It's like Aslan. I don't get to hear their story. I mean, I think I will someday, you know, and we'll have as many stories as there are people of what the wonderful thing that God did for this person and the wonderful thing that God did for that person. I really, I like to think of it that way, that we will all be, I read one lady and she wrote a book about heaven, and she said, imagine like a museum and every exhibit is one of us and we're an exhibit of something special God did. Like, whoa, here's what I did this with my life and I was wasting, but God did this for me. Oh, I was dying of cancer, but God healed me. You know, and every person is an exhibit and we're all saying, isn't God amazing? You want to know what he did for me? What did he do for you? You know, and that we'll spend eternity like that. I don't know that it will be like that. That's me. I feel like I'm going to be on that ledge with the people by the tree though for a while. Okay, I want to throw in this eagle because the eagle, first of all, do you catch the idea that a sign appeared in the sky made out of little lights? It's like a neon sign, you know, with the flashing, and it says, Deligite justitiam qui judicatis terram. Love, justice, you who rule the earth. It's a warning to the leaders. Love, justice. What does justice look like? It's conforming ourselves as much as we can to God's will, right? As a ruler. So I act in a way that I think God would have me act. That would be justice based on what I know. So the teram, you know, so there's an M at the end of teram, and then it turns and it says I and me instead of we and us. All the rulers with one vision to live out God's justice, right, on earth, talk to him. I don't know why I have to keep, I always have to act it out like you're three. The eagle talks to him. Now, why an eagle? Why is an eagle justice? Maybe penguin. Why not a penguin? Nobody would take a penguin seriously. I object to that.
If you think about it, people kind of I don't know why, but they just kind of that's kind of what we think about for justice. That's kind of like the justice bird. Have you seen America? America, land of the free, home of the brave. Just
Skewed because it's our national bird. Yeah, do y'all know that Ben Franklin wanted it to be the turkey?
Yeah.
I
We
mean,
just change everything. Plus, would we eat turkey at
so
Thanksgiving then?
shameful. That would be so shameful.
Would we eat eagles at Thanksgiving? What would we eat? Oh my gosh. But let me throw this out. Where, before Dante's time, something that Dante would have known, did an eagle figure prominently? A group of people had an eagle.
The Romans.
The Romans had an eagle, the legionary eagle. Some of you read The Eagle of the Ninth with me, right? Long time ago. Oh no, it was wonderful. You're wrong. No, it's fine. Does not. You don't have to love it. But remember that each legion had an eagle, standard, and the eagle was the symbol of Rome. The eagle was the symbol of ruling the people, not always justly, but remember what Dante is wanting. Remember what he keeps saying Italy needs. What does Italy need according to Dante? The greyhound. And someday the greyhound will come and he will rise between Feltro and Feltro, whatever that means. Nobody knows. The greyhound will come and he will rule. We've talked about this several times. Remember, Dante's also writing political allegory. It's not just spiritual. What does he think needs to happen in Italy so that the Italian cities stop killing each other? We need a ruler. We need a ruler. And if you read the notes, like Ethan was saying, you'll find out that there was if I say he was a Charles or Henry, I have a 98% chance of getting it right because everybody's Charles or Henry. But there was a leader that was coming down, but he died. He came in to invade Italy and then he died. But Dante had high hopes for this guy. He really believed they needed a strong central authority to just squish the Italian cities like bugs if necessary, and then tell people to straighten up and fly right. And of course, Italy, Rome, the eagle, is all tied up in his mind. Justice springs from rulers that are just, like these guys in the sphere of Jupiter, right? We need rulers that are just. And but he sees everywhere injustice. Injustice. And 5 minutes. I brought this in specifically to tell you about this. So I have to bring that in. In Canto 18, the eagle talks about injustice in the church. He says, those church people, of course, I didn't write the pages down. It's not helpful. I was in the right one. He says, page 755, line 118. Therefore, I pray the mind that initiated your power and motion to observe the source of the smoke by which your ray is vitiated. That is a lot of words, isn't it? The power, the mind would be God that initiated your power in motion, the eagle of justice, to observe the source of the smoke by which your ray is vitiated. God's justice shines down, but it's like hidden in smoke. We don't see it. It's vitiated. It's obscured. That it be moved to anger once again against the buyers and sellers in the temple, whose walls were built of blood and martyrs' pain. We're so not going to get to that, but that's okay. Who were the buyers and sellers in the temple? Does this ring a bell?
The merchants when Jesus went.
Jesus drove them out and overturned the tables, right? But there is no temple anymore. The temple's gone. And then it says this: the temple whose walls were built of blood and martyrs' pain. What temple is that?
He's talking about
He's talking about the church. And he says, it is full of buyers and sellers. O soldiery of heaven, to whose array my mind returns, pray for all those on earth who follow bad example and go astray. In earlier eras, wars were carried on by swords. Now, by denying this man or that, the bread the Heavenly Father denies to none. He said, you used to fight wars with swords. Now you deny people communion. You excommunicate. Is that just? Dante says no. But you who scribble only to scratch out. You write down things and then change your mind. You scribble and scratch out. Remember that Peter and Paul, who died for the vineyard you trample, still defend the good you flout. Well, may you say, and now the churchman is talking, my heart's wish is so set on the image of the saint who lived alone and was forced to give his head in forfeit. What saint lived alone and was forced to give his head? John the Baptist. So I'm going to read that again. Now you know he's talking about John the Baptist. My heart's wish is so set on the image of the saint who lived alone and who was forced to give his head in forfeit, as if it were a favor at a ball. What do I care for a fisherman or old Paul? Now, at first you read this like, what? But they're devoted to John the Baptist? What? The coins in Florence were stamped with John the Baptist. It means they want money. I am so intent on that, on John the Baptist, that I don't care for some old fisherman Peter or old Paul. He said that's what the church has become. There is no justice in the church. The eagle is crying out for justice in Italy. It's also crying out for justice in the church. Yeah, Ethan.
And he says further in Canto 21, dissing, well, what was it? Basically diss, like the Pope or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
With Peter Damiano.
Oh, I think it's on page 782. Your pastors are so bloated and vain, they go propped on either side. That does not sound like a compliment at all. And they shout. They shout so loud it hurts Dante's ears and scares him. They shout for justice. Another thing, this is back to God's will. Peter Damiano comes, and Dante says, why were you chosen to come down and talk to me? We'll end with this. Page 780. Why were you chosen? Why was it God's will for you to come talk to me? Line 88. My bliss, says Peter, flames only as the ray shines down. I do whatever God says. As much of glory as I am given to see, my flame gives back in glory of its own. But in all heaven, the soul granted most light, the seraph that has God closest in view, could not explain what you have asked to know. I don't know. I just do what God wants. I don't know why you picked me. You're asking something beyond all of us, even the saints in glory. We don't fathom God's eternal will. We just obey, right? So I want you guys to finish it. Are we okay? Are you paying other people to do your homework for you? It kind of looks like that a little bit. So you're going to go. I just want to tell you what's going to happen. You're going to finish it this week. Remember what's happening. They're going through these spheres, but the biggest sphere on the outside is called the primum mobile, right? It moves, and then it makes all the other inside ones move. And then outside of that is the empyrean. This is like outside the universe, sort of. It's where God is. And this is where, remember, I told you that you're going to find out that everything they've seen is not exactly what you think, right? The fact that the poor Picard is in the moon and whatever, you're going to see what it's really like. But I'll throw one more thing out. I'm not going to bother to look it up, but twice Dante stops and looks back down. And I just think it's really interesting. He looks back down to see where he's come from, and he sees the earth, and he talks about it as some puny, insignificant little speck. And so I want you to keep that in mind every time for the rest of your life. People try to sell you that medieval people thought that man and the earth, because they were the center of the solar system, they were the most important thing. Dante's very explicit. It's a puny nothing, and it's as far away from God as you can get. That's the Divine Comedy look at the earth. It's not what we've been led to believe, that medieval people, it's like, oh, it's the center of everything and it's the shining star of the whole universe. No, they didn't think that. But I fear sometimes we kind of act like we do. Maybe not us in this room, but moderns. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're all that matters, nothing beyond earth or us. We don't have to consider any of it. They did not think so. Okay, finish it. Remember, it's going to go outside of everything, and then we're going to see what's really happening behind the scenes. And have a good week. I will see you next time. And my video